No word on if Desmond Howard saw this one coming while he was taking out his trash, but nonetheless, we've got news today, not necessarily relating to Texas, but it does impact the upcoming bowl game against Michigan. Sherrone Moore fired with cause at Michigan. We'll break it down here from the Texas angle on this special live edition of On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by CJ Vogel. Let's thank our sponsor, CJ, right now at the top for this live edition of On Texas Football. That's our friends over at Von Lane. You know, the fall is always stacked in Austin, Texas, from football Saturdays, the NFL Sundays, you got ACL, Formula One, and whether it's the fall or any time of year, Von Lane is the smart way to get wherever you're going. Forget TSA lines or fighting that traffic on I-35. With Von Lane, you board in minutes at luxury hotel terminals. Then it's just 22 big first-class seats, each with Wi-Fi outlets and an onboard attendant bringing you snacks, drinks, and if you're so inclined, beer and cocktails. You'll arrive relaxed, ready for the game, the concert, or family time, and booking is open through the end of the year, so you can book your holiday travel right now. If you haven't already, go to vonlane.com, use the code OTF25 to save $20 off your first ride. Von Lane, it's elevated regional bus transportation. CJ, there were some cryptic Twitter posts that pointed to this, but I didn't think it 3:00 this afternoon, 3:30, I'd be in the car line picking up my kid from school, and the word would come down to Sherrone Moore fired with cause at Michigan. CJ, which tells you, and as Sandman points out, it was an inappropriate relationship with a Michigan staffer. That's according to the university release, that they found credible evidence that was happening. CJ, the timing is not ideal because we're post signing day, and the coaching carousel has, at least it's slowed down now after Matt Campbell to Penn State. But that tells you this has been brewing behind the scenes for a while, and once it was clear, it was one of those deals where Michigan just had to act fast.
Yeah, I think so. And again, it felt like up until this point, Jeff, this had been one of the slower days since the regular season had concluded on the news front. I guess I see why everybody had been prepping for this essentially behind the scenes. But no, to your point, massive implications across college football. Michigan's a massive job. You saw what it looked like about a couple of years ago when they opted to stick with Sherrone Moore, but that job came open. Folks want that Michigan job. It comes with obviously a lot of tradition, very prideful fan base as well. But this is big news because, look, Sherrone was the interim, right? That's something that I think Michigan fans had struggled to kind of accept at the time. Now that Michigan is now open for the market, it's going to be really interesting to see who starts to really trickle their name in. And look, I know that there's going to be a lot of conversations about Malachi Lee. Folks are already clamoring for Andrew Marsh as well. Look, we're going to have to wait for this to kind of play out a little bit. Yes, there are going to be some signees that request their release from their NLI. That's how that works when a coach gets fired or is let go after National Signing Day. And as you see here, Foster, thank you very much for the super chat. If I'm flooding Sark, I'm tampering with Lee Asat. Look, I think this is one of those things before these kids get to campus. There's probably going to be a few releases from their NLI. We'll see, of course, because, Jeff, you pointed it out to me before we went live. Sherrone Moore being an offensive line coach or a guy that was very heavily involved with the offensive line, if I'm Malachi Lee, I have no reason to stick with Michigan anymore.
Yeah, Juan Garza with a super chat. Thank you, Juan. Said Malachi Lee to Texas. Did he know about this before he signed with Michigan? Juan, I don't have any intel from what happens in Ann Arbor. I highly doubt anybody at Michigan was talking openly about this with Malachi Lee or any recruit leading up to this announcement. Now, could the family have heard something and asked the staff? I don't know, CJ. That would just be pure speculation on my part. But we talked about this probably middle of the season because, look, here's the bottom line is even when he committed to Michigan, Texas did not stop recruiting Malachi Lee. They were on him. This was an ink is dry recruitment. And there was a point in the middle of the season, CJ, I want to say it was right around the time they lost to USC where, we even talked about on the recruiting breakdown, you, myself, and Jerry, where it's like, hey, if Michigan loses a couple more games here, what does that mean for Sherrone Moore, and what does that mean for Malachi Lee? It looked like they stemmed the tide. They finished 9-3, and now okay, this clearly did not have anything to do with wins and losses. This was a completely different deal. So, yeah, CJ, I doubt Malachi Lee and his family had any inkling this was something brewing. Otherwise, there's no way they would have signed with Michigan.
No, I think that's absolutely the case. And look, there's no reason for those kids to know, right? This is one of those things that you hope to keep under wraps if that's the head coach that you like to see for the foreseeable future. That's kind of how college football works, right? But here's a couple of the guys that I wanted to mention in this Michigan 2026 class. Savion Hyder, number 1 running back in the country. That's a 5-star back. He's now going to be probably back on the open market. I could assume the same for Carter Meadows, a 5-star defensive end out of Washington, D.C. In the local area, look, Alistair Vallejo out of Liberty Hill. You got Jamarian Vincent from Waco Connolly at safety. Jordan Deck out of Frisco Lone Star. Michigan recruited the state of Texas very well. Now, again, I would assume, rather likely, Jeff, that a number of these kids request their NLI release and get back out on the open market, of course, for these kids. It's unfortunate it happened after signing day, but more so very fortunate for them that it happened before they arrive on campus.
Yeah, Foster 340, thank you for the super chat. Clint says, can't be dipping your pen in the company ink. I wonder who their interim is for the bowl game or if they potentially back out entirely. Clint, thank you for the super chat.
Clint, that's a crazy analogy.
And Big Pokey says, can Malachi Leaf, actually, I'm sorry, not that one, but Juan Garza asked, would Michigan opt out of the bowl game? Juan, thank you for the super chat. So Clint and Juan, to both of your questions on the super chats, Biff Poggi is the interim. There was the time earlier this year where Sherrone Moore had to serve his suspension. CJ, I can't remember off the top of my head if it was a 2-game or a 3-game, but Biff Poggi was the acting head coach. And that release that came from Michigan, Ward Manuel, the AD, said Biff Poggi is the interim, effective immediately. So, CJ, I mean, I guess they could opt out of the bowl game potentially, but I would guess at this point it's probably, hey, just Biff Poggi's the interim, and whoever wants to be here for the bowl game, we'll play the bowl game. But obviously, I mean, I think it stands to reason. Guys with NFL decisions, guys that were thinking about jumping in the portal, this probably pushes those guys further in the direction where they were leaning.
Yeah, that's where I wanted to go. Look, Biff Poggi, again, he was previously the Michigan associate head coach from 2021 to 2022. He then took a 2-year leave to go be the head coach at Charlotte, returned to Michigan. He's a Michigan guy through and through. Probably a Michigan man of more character than I guess you could say about the former interim Michigan head coach. And now he, again, is the associate head coach for the Wolverines. That's going to be really interesting. And if for folks who haven't seen Biff on the sidelines before, Jeff, maybe Matthew, can you bring up a pic of Biff Poggi over at Charlotte as the head coach? He's got one of the better head coaching looks in all of the country with the super loose cutoff sweatshirt. It's got holes all over it. I think he's fantastic. But anyways, to the latter point that you were trying to make is, yeah, it makes much more sense for these guys who are on the fringe or at least already declared or out of eligibility for the NFL draft to say, hey, you know what? It's probably not worth me playing in this game considering the coach that I wanted to play for, the coach that got me here. Thank you, Matt. I mean, that's unbelievable. That looks like a man that just mowed about 30 lawns. He's got probably the grass stains on his sneakers. That's a great look.
I look more fit to be a college head coach when I'm mowing my lawn than Biff Poggi does when he's actually roaming the sidelines. That's my love-hate relationship with Biff Poggi is something else for those who've followed me at my various ports of call. But CJ, a lot of stuff in the chat. Hey, does kids may play hard for Biff? But again, I just think it's a different time. And there's going to be a chunk of these kids. I'm sure there's a decent amount that, hey, whoever the head coach at Michigan is, they're going to want to be there. But one reason why it's not just because it's the cool thing to do or it's the trendy thing to do, opt out of the bowl game. CJ, you've got the portal opening up on January 2nd. Now you've got a coaching search to conduct at a time where it's not really conducive to conducting one. I mean, hey, if we're being 100% honest, if you're Michigan, your number one candidate may just be the guy who took the job at Penn State, because one of the things I heard for years on Matt Campbell was, hey, one of the 2 jobs he might wait to open if Ohio State or Michigan ever came open, that might be his preferred destination. Well, now Michigan's open a few days too late, and Matt Campbell's the head coach at Penn State. So could they just ride with Biff Poggi as an interim in 2026? That's certainly a choice, but it's regardless, CJ, this is not ideal for Michigan, for the administration, for the coaches that are still there, for guys on the roster. They've got more. My bottom line is they've got a lot more important things to worry about right now than the Citrus Bowl.
Yeah, I think that's something, we talk about roster retention and keeping your big main guys on campus, the stars of your school. you're Bryce Underwood, what are you thinking right now? If you retain Biff Poggi as your coach, I mean, is that who you signed up to play for? I don't know. So there's a lot to think about. I think Michigan, of course, finally hits this cycle, whether it be too late or not. Look, they got to find a head coach. They got to find an answer. And my gut tells me that they have something lined up, given that, this is probably something that they've known about for a few months. Going back to the NFL draft and some of the guys, as we welcome Bobby Burton onto the show tonight, I wanted to just go through a quick rundown of guys who are NFL caliber guys, all on the defensive side of the ball. Rod Moore, Jair Hill, TJ Metcalf, all in the secondary. Derek Moore, defensive end. Jayshon Barnum, outside linebacker who Texas saw in 2023. Rayshawn Benny on the defensive line. Look, that's a good 7 or 8 guys on their starting defense alone. If you're in the position to go pro, I don't know why I would play for a school at the end of the day. That is very much up in the air. But Bobby, as we welcome you in, I want to get your thoughts first and foremost. How surprising was this news drop to you today? And ultimately, what do you think it means for this game at the end of the month?
Well, we had heard some rumblings behind the scenes, but we don't pass on rumors typically, right? And so I had no clue the severity of this, frankly. But yeah, big news, earthquake of sorts in college sports, because Michigan is one of those jobs. It is a blue blood of college football. I think that it is meaningful in a number of ways towards the University of Texas. You mentioned the guys that are going pro and what it might do to this game coming up in the Citrus Bowl, CJ. Texas opened, I think, at 5.5-point favorites over Michigan. Let's check and see what those odds look like this time tomorrow. What that line is this time tomorrow based on that. Biff Poggi, you mentioned, or Poggi. We got to figure out how to say his name correctly. I think it's Poggi, right?
Big Biff.
But my point is on all of this is twofold. One, what does it affect Texas in the near term with this game? And then also, I've got to be blunt. What does this do to their existing roster and existing signees? Because Michigan is littered with players that can play for any team in the country. And, unless they get a coach soon, they're going to be trying to put fingers in the dam, holding back the water coming through that are going to be these players, whether that's guys currently on the roster that are getting ready to go into the portal potentially, or guys that just signed with him less than a week ago today. A couple of people have mentioned Malachi Lee, the offensive lineman out of Honolulu, Hawaii. Absolutely, he's one of those guys. But there are multiple players that signed with Michigan that the Longhorns could be interested in. Young man, defensive back out of Waco, signed with Michigan just last week as well. There's just a ton of different guys. And I think that we don't even know the repercussions yet. But it is to your point, CJ, and ask me what I thought. I think it's an earthquake in college football. This happens a week after National Signing Day, 3 weeks before you're going to go play a bowl game. Big news here in this game or in this situation.
I want to get you both of y'all's take on this. Bobby, CJ, and I were talking about this before we went live. If you're Texas, this is kind of a byproduct of why it was smart to approach at least a decent chunk, in my opinion, of your on-campus bowl practices. Should have had little to nothing to do with Michigan. It should have been about, hey, let's get some scrimmage situations for our guys that didn't play much during the season. Let's use it as a glorified spring ball to, number one, evaluate some guys, and two, I can't stress this enough. Without that second portal window, guys on this roster are going to have to make really tough decisions. Do I wait this out for another year, or do I roll the dice and jump in the portal? They need all the intel they can to make that decision.
Completely agree with that. That's my whole part, Jeff, is that they're going to have somebody in place by January 2nd. Okay, that means they're going to have to hire somebody that may, and you know as well as I do that Kalen DeBoer would be a natural hire for them.
Yeah,
Midwest guy, successful, kind of fits that mold. Maybe better situated in the North than in the South. His current role, right? I think there could be a number of things that happen based off of this, but the turnaround time here is crazy to me because the players on Michigan's roster have to make these decisions almost instantly.
And that's kind of where my head goes is how long did Michigan plan ahead for something like this? How many, perhaps fishing rods did they have out elsewhere in the lake of college football for guys to nibble on this job, and that's what's interesting to me, Jeff, because had word gotten out, I don't know, a week ago about this job potentially opening up, I think Matt Campbell doesn't take that Penn State job.
Probably,
to your point, this is probably a job that he had been waiting for opening up for what, 10 years almost, since he put his name on the map. Like that makes sense to me. But now that the news has dropped and now that everybody's seeing the first couple of dominoes start to fall, who really starts to take, interest? And Kalen DeBoer, to me, Bobby, is one who I don't see as a fit at Alabama. I think he's been looking around elsewhere as well. I think originally he wanted to get out to the West Coast. I was told that about 2 weeks ago. Now that Michigan's open, that's a big fish job. Is that a move that he makes? And if that's the case, look, that's another couple of dominoes that if Alabama opens up, buckle up.
Bobby, you've
just keep holding out. That's the Steve Sarkisian.
Bobby,
am I okay now?
We got a little lag, but I think we're good. Bobby, you've been covering college football. I was not of legal age to obtain a driver's license while you were in the midst of doing this back in the 90s. So you've been around this a long time. And I'll go to KD35. I am the best. It says the amount of P4 jobs open in 2025 is insane. Bobby, off the top of my head, I can't think of a coaching carousel cycle where there's been this many big time jobs open. That was before Michigan came open. And there's the Marcus Freeman NFL rumors. I mean, Notre Dame may potentially come open by the time this thing is said and done. I don't know. But, Bobby, I can't remember a hiring cycle for coaches that was at least this volatile like this one.
Yeah, interesting. You mentioned Marcus Freeman. Somebody reported yesterday, I believe, that he's the lead for the New York Giants job. Yeah. I mean, can you all imagine if Notre Dame, Penn State, Michigan, Florida, Auburn, LSU, Ole Miss, UCLA, goodness gracious, all come available. Just crazy list. I can't think of another time where there have been this many, not just big jobs, but good jobs. I mean, Florida and LSU are really good jobs. Michigan is Penn State is a good job. You even have Virginia Tech is a good job.
Yeah.
I mean, now I got taken, but my point is, I have a hard time. Auburn, really good job. I have a hard time thinking about this from that perspective of, are there enough people really to fill it? I personally think there have been some people in this coaching carousel that have reached a little bit for their jobs. So in other words, Arkansas, I think that was a reach for Ryan Silverleaf, for example. Now, maybe he turns out being great, but is Michigan going to have to reach? I thought they reached for Sherrone Moore in the first place, right? Yeah. CJ mentioned it early in this broadcast that he was brought in initially as an interim and eventually got the job. I don't know if Michigan's going to have to do that or not. I mean, we'll see because if guys like Kalen DeBoer turn them down, where do they go?
Yeah. To your point, real quick, 16 of the 68 Power 4 teams, that's 23.5%, have experienced some sort of turnover at their head coaching position. That's something that I don't think we've ever seen before.
No, and it's to Bobby's point, it's multiple jobs in the Power 4 leagues. Well, I love the fact that my phone's blowing up with my buddies texting me about Biff Poggi being the interim at Michigan. I just love that. My afternoon is going swimmingly. We'll touch on this too. Rocky P, thank you for the super chat. Says if Michigan pulls out, does Texas still get the 15 practices? Bobby, I would think now. I don't know if Michigan's had a team meeting yet or anything like that. And we've talked about, hey, you've got NFL guys to make decisions, portal guys to make decisions. I would assume if Biff Poggi has agreed to be the interim, and it seems like based on that release, Ward Manuel had a plan. It doesn't sound on the surface like opting out of something Michigan's going to do with this.
It sounds like 99% sure they're playing.
Yeah.
I don't, and you had to know that they accepted this bowl bid with this possibility in
Yep.
mind.
Yeah.
That when did the bowl bids go out? 3 days ago on Sunday, correct? Yeah, this inappropriate relationship that they're describing, the investigation did not start yesterday. And so Ward Manuel probably had this understood. I don't know if Texas would still get the 15 practices, Rocky. So that I think that's a fair question. I don't know really the answer there. They're already practicing some though. So just keep that in mind as well. One other thing I think is important is I find it, and Jeff, you opened this with the comment about Desmond Howard.
Yeah.
Karma is a you-know-what. Is it not for Desmond Howard and the folks in Ann Arbor?
You did.
Think about what he said as it relates to Steve Sarkisian, and now let's see what he means by that when he deals with his own team.
Yeah.
Remember we talked about that. What's he going to say when it's his own team? He didn't say anything. That's what happened. And that's why I go back to some things that are happening at ESPN right now. I disagree with them. I mean, you can't have those guys, jockeying for certain teams or not playing even-handed with the opponents.
Yeah.
And I feel like Desmond Howard did so with Texas.
Yeah.
Clearly.
That was my thing with how Nick Saban handled the Lane Kiffin stuff. I mean, it's not unexpected. I mean, they're both Jimmy Sexton clients, so it's not like Nick Saban's going to get up there and badmouth Lane Kiffin or Jimmy Sexton. That would just be bad business. It wouldn't be smart on his part. And you can say a lot of things about Nick Saban and call him a lot of things. Stupid is not one of them. So it just rubbed me the wrong way that it happened. I do, Bobby, want to get your thoughts on this because you jumped on while CJ and I were still going. Big Pokey 7043, thank you for the super chat. Said, can Malachi Lee flip after this? Bobby, just want to get your thoughts on what this could mean for Malachi Lee in Texas.
Well, it could mean a lot, and it certainly could just basically reconnoiter his entire recruitment. As we know, and I think CJ or you, Jeff, one of you two pointed out because I was listening to you guys before I got back to the house. You mentioned that Sherrone Moore was a former offensive line coach and a former offensive lineman at the University of Oklahoma as a player. And so he clearly has been a key piece of recruiting all of their offensive linemen, all of them. By the way, I heard y'all mention names. One name that you forgot was Steve Frazier or Blake Frazier out of Vanderbilt. I mean, he's a starter at left tackle. Now, his dad, Steve, played for Michigan, so that may be a hard pull, but those guys that were recruited by him can happen. Malachi cannot quote unquote flip. He would first have to ask out of his LOI or NLI, however you want to say it, national letter of intent. We used to just call it letter of intent. He would have to first ask out of that and get that approved, and then he would be back on the open market. I think he's trying to be a midterm grad, so how's he preparing to be a midterm enrollee right now, guys, if he doesn't know who his head coach is going to be? And if his head coach is no longer going to be a former offensive lineman? Would he have chosen Michigan that way? I don't know.
It's a great question. Ty Haywood, the former 5-star offensive lineman from Denton Ryan, also on Michigan as well.
Yeah. I was talking to Bobby about CJ and I were talking about the Michigan roster, and I'm like, look, there's certain kids that are at Michigan right now, maybe some of the signing class. It doesn't matter who. It's just like Texas or any of these other big blue blood jobs. So those kids just will be at Michigan regardless of who the coach is. I remember Blake Frazier the first time I talked to him when he was looking like a prospect. He's like, well, yeah, my dad won a national championship at Michigan, played with Tom Brady and Charles Woodson. I'm like, yeah, this Michigan offers this kid.
Yep.
It could be the big house could be burning down, and he'll be there with a shovel to scoop up the ashes and help rebuild. Like,
it might be burning down here soon.
I'll tell you another one to maybe watch for, and I'm not saying that it'll happen, but Texas brought in Rod Pierce. Remember him from Chicago area, defensive tackle? Mm-hmm. Brought him in for an official visit 3 years ago. He's a starter now at Michigan. So there's just all kinds of possibilities, but this is all conjecture until some of these players start making personal announcements. To CJ's point, I think the next step will be guys opting out of the bowl game, well, or not. I mean, I don't want to say they're definitely going to opt out, but that would seem to be the next step in this. The one thing I would caution people about that, though, is Biff Poggi is not coaching a position, right? Sherrone Moore was not coaching a position. Biff Poggi was just an extra assistant. Him elevating to head coach doesn't cause anybody to have a new position coach. It doesn't really cause anything other than a switch at the head. And so the position coaches may be saying, hey, stay with us. We're going to try to get Biff the job and try to rally the troops that way, which is what I would do if I were on that staff as a coach, right? And so maybe that's what's happening behind the scenes. We just don't know. I mean, the news is so fresh. Sherrone Moore being fired by the University of Michigan for cause.
CJ, I want to get your thoughts on this super chat from Zay. Thank you, Zay, for the super chat. So what's your thoughts on Jamarian Vincent, Michigan commit, safety from Waco Connolly? Was committed to Baylor for a while, and then a couple days before signing day, he ends up flipping to Michigan, similar to Jamarian Carlton, who was committed to Baylor, flipping to Texas late in the process. CJ, any thoughts on Jamarian Vincent? Maybe I don't know about the recruitment side of it, but maybe just as a prospect.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, pretty tough luck on the timing of that flip, huh? But more than anything, I've seen Jamarian a couple times, and he's visited Texas, I think 4 or 5 times, dating back to about 2 years ago when he first got on the map. His last visit to Texas didn't come until, or I guess it wasn't, was most recently in February. Like it had been quite a while into the 2026 cycle before Texas had moved off. But look, very raw as a prospect. He's listed 6'2", about 175 pounds, I think. He's very wiry right now. He's still very raw. And again, like what we see with a number of those kids from Connolly, it takes some time to get them to acclimate to one specific position. They're asked to do just about anything and everything at Connolly. So whether it's cornerback or safety, right now I think corner is where he's pegged to play at the next level. It's going to take him quite a bit of time, and Texas obviously had the opportunity to go back and try to flip him from Baylor themselves, and they opted to go elsewhere. So I don't think there will be much interest moving forward. I think Texas has at least shown me this cycle that they're looking to get guys with a little bit more refinement in their secondary at the moment.
Hey, let's go over the guys that Texas did offer from this Michigan recruiting class, just so people have it. Savion Hyder is the nation's #1 running back. Texas at one time put out feelers. He just wasn't receptive. But he is a big name guy, and I can't imagine him going back on the market will happen. You don't do that. So Savion Hyder out of Virginia is one. Titan Davis, a defensive lineman out of St. Louis. Texas offered him early as well. What's that?
He checks the box in the name game there, Bobby.
There you go. Malachi Lee, Texas offered. Matt Ludwig, the tight end out of Montana. Texas expressed interest in as well. And I believe that is it. Those are the guys. So it's about 5 guys from the recruiting class that Texas offered. We'll see what happens. I mean, look, people are going to be coming at those guys. They can't necessarily go directly to them, but they're going to, as well as I do, little birdies are going to be in their ears. We'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, I would think somebody mentioned in the chat about Savion Hyder and Ohio State. So, look, Ohio State's got a really good running back in Bo Jackson. So, knowing Texas has Ohio State game 2 in 2026, anybody that's in that Michigan signing class or on that roster that ends up going to Ohio State, that'll be something to file away. We can talk about it during the offseason. Hey, Bobby, real quick, I think it's worth – you mentioned bowl opt-outs. I think it's worth re-racking what you wrote this morning over on TexasFootball.com. I know you guys discussed it on Coffee and Football. For as far as where Texas stands right now, bowl opt-outs, Bobby, and then anything you've got that's transpired today on the running back coach front.
Yeah, absolutely. Bowl opt-outs at this point. Ethan Burke expected to not play. Obviously, Anthony Hill not playing. NFL declaration, but I've been told Ethan Burke not expected to play. I've also been told Jalen Gilbo not playing. The defensive back, cornerback at Texas. Why? I don't quite understand that one. Like Burke, I think, is going to be an NFL player. I think he's going to get drafted. Somebody told me second round. I think other people think third, fourth, even fifth, whatever. He's going to play in the NFL, right? And he's a senior. The problem that I have with Gilbo is he needs more tape, particularly on special teams at this point, because I think that anybody in his situation is probably going to have to be a full service player, so to speak. Now, maybe if he's been passed up on the depth chart, he doesn't want to play. I get it, but it'll be interesting. I was told all of the offensive linemen are going to play in the bowl game. So that includes DJ Campbell and Trevor Gooseby and all those. I mean, Cole Hudson, Connor Robertson, Brandon Baker. That was a position that I think we were all concerned with at some point, because you don't want to throw Arch out there and, have the offensive line look like Swiss cheese. So I think that those are the bowl opt-outs as well as the bowl opt-ins that I think are equally important. Oh, and I want to say Jelani McDonald, Manny Muhammad, DeAndre Moore, all those guys are practicing right now.
Yeah. Add that. And that segues me, Bobby, into something I want CJ to bring up. CJ, anything on DeAndre Moore? I know you had the news reported yesterday, or anything else as far as portal activity you've been following today?
Yeah, of course. I mentioned at the very beginning of this episode, it felt like today was a slower day in terms of portal entries, especially from the Texas side, where no one entered this morning. Obviously, the name I'm still monitoring very closely is DeAndre Moore. I do not expect him back at Texas in 2026. Whether that's to the portal, whether that's to the NFL draft, he's going to have a decision to make here over the next month or so. But that's where I sit right now in DeAndre Moore. I've heard for a few weeks now that it felt unlikely and has increasingly grown unlikely that he will be back with Texas next year. So look, Texas still plenty of players still to announce. The portal again opens up January 2nd.
I want to say, CJ, that's a projection. Just so everybody's clear out there. CJ's not saying he's absolutely going in. It's over. CJ's projecting that right now.
Yep.
And I think that we got to be clear about that because I think some discussions haven't already been had. Sark and his staff are having some of those actually this week. So we'll know more as time goes on.
Juan Garza, we haven't brought up this super chat from you, so we'll bring it up. This is Brian Kelly to Michigan, ? I don't know what Michigan's going to do. Bobby, I do want to get your thoughts on this from a Michigan standpoint. Since it's so late in the cycle and, we'll see what happens with the coaching search that they're obviously having to conduct now. Is there a possibility they could just roll with Biff Poggi as an interim in 2026 and just start, hey, we'll be the first at the table, first in the buffet line for the 26-27 cycle?
So I don't know Biff Poggi very well. I mean, I've seen him, and like y'all, I've seen the muscle shirts or whatever you want to call those that CJ likes. My point is that's not – I hadn't thought of that, but – that might be a bridge to the next year. I wouldn't do it because I think that you got to have a coach that where you're going, and I just feel like you got to find somebody. I would not do that, but is it the best option given maybe your limited options today? Perhaps maybe they think about it. What do y'all think this does to this game? I think now it could go one of two ways to Texas, Michigan in the game. I want to ask y'all that. They could rally the troops or they could dial out. Okay, we've seen teams rally the troops before when they lose their coach in a bowl game. We've seen them ace out like Florida State did against Georgia a couple years ago.
Yep. That's where I lean. I think they ace out.
Yeah.
They don't, no disrespect to Biff, but he wasn't on staff the last 2 years. Now, for some of these super seniors that are still around, he was. But for the majority of that roster, he was at Charlotte for 2 years. So who are you playing for if it's not yourself? And if you are playing for yourself, well, how many of these seniors who are, eligible to move on, how many of them will be sticking around playing? So I think right now, with all of what's going on at Michigan, it wouldn't surprise me if you saw even a mass exodus of players right now.
I would have to think 9 times out of 10, if this would have happened even 5 years ago, I would have said, yeah, they probably circle the wagons and they would love to, get their mind off everything and, hey, let's go beat Texas and end this on a high note. But now with the way the portal works, and again, that thing opens January 2nd. So you're going to play the game on December 31st. And then 48 hours later, less than 48 hours later, the transfer portal is going to open. So I think at this point, guys have to really watch out for themselves, look out for themselves, and understand. I know they want to do right by Michigan in a perfect world, but it's not a perfect world right now. So I think there's going to be some tough decisions that really have to be made. And we're probably going to see a bare bones Michigan roster. Like, it's going to look, to me, I think it's going to look night and day different from what it did in the Ohio State game. In other words, if Sark and the staff, if they watch that Ohio State film and then look at the starting 22 for Michigan, or even their top, 40 guys that they're going to be facing in the Citrus Bowl, I just think, Bobby, it's going to look entirely different. Like, it's going to be a night and day type deal. They can circle the wagons all they want, but from a personnel standpoint, it's a completely different world. I want to get to this super chat before we get out of here. 100-Yard Podcast 7, thank you for the super chat. Says, hey, OTF, why is it that Texas is struggling with O-line? Having to get 3 or 4 for them from the portal isn't ideal. Obviously, not a lack of development, but why aren't these softs or redshirt sophomores ready to play? Bobby, I tend to think it's maybe not so much the young guys not being ready to play as much as it is, why leave it to chance when you don't have to? In other words, if you can go get proven commodities that can come in and help you maximize this season with Arch Manning, they left some stuff to chance in heading into 2025, and we saw how that ended. To me, it's just, hey, if you can upgrade the roster and put some experience between the opposing defense and Arch Manning, why not?
Yeah, and I think that this is a good question, actually. You shouldn't want to have to go get 3 to 4. Whether it was recruiting or development or some guys that they thought would pan out, just haven't. I don't know the exact answer, but I feel like some of the guys they like the best as backups right now are actually the younger guys. Now, one of them previously was Andre Kojo, right? And he goes out and injures his knee. So, that could have been a guy that could have helped this year a little bit. We've yet to see what Nate Kibble or Daniel Cruz can really do. They're in that kind of class where you're waiting. But I agree with Jeff. I'm not taking a chance this year with Arch Manning. I just don't think you can. You can't leave that chance. I think you left it to chance a little bit this year. Texas brought in Emmanuel Pregnon from USC to possibly be an offensive guard this offseason. They, for whatever reason, were not able to close the deal. He goes to Oregon. He's a first-team All-American this year. You think Texas wouldn't have looked better with a first-team All-American at one of the guard spots this year on offense for Arch Manning? You can't afford to let that happen next year in what will be Arch's last year. And I know folks are, well, it's not all about Arch, and I agree with that. It is rare when you get a second-year starting quarterback that's going to be a long-term NFL guy. And that's what Arch Manning is. And that's what Texas has coming back next year. So this offensive line, whether it needs 3 or 4 or whatever the number is. I would say this. It's all homegrown for Texas at that position.
Yeah.
Other positions aren't all homegrown now. Other spots on the roster. It's all homegrown in offensive line. It's a large number. They went to the portal at defensive line. They didn't go at offensive line. Probably should have went at both in retrospect.
Yeah, CJ, I want to touch on this story. This just fell in our lap. And I know I haven't had a chance to fully read it yet, but I'll just read the news release from the University of Texas that this was sent out literally 5 minutes ago. Said the University of Texas at Austin has issued a request for proposal, an RFP, to seek private developers to plan, design, construct, equip, finance, and operate a small multi-purpose public arena to serve as the competition home for the Longhorns' 4-time national champion women's volleyball and an adjacent student athlete housing facility with the minimal outlay from the university. Now, there's some renderings on Twitter as to what this will look like. Bobby, CJ, any thoughts on this? Look,
where is that? That's going to be the volleyball arena?
Yeah, it'll be up on the hill north, or I guess what is that? East of where the swim center is. So it'll be south of the Moody Center. You see it in the background there, right
south
on
of Moody. Okay,
south of Moody. It'll be right on that corner of MLK and I-35.
Literally right as you get off the freeway.
It's going to be right. Yeah. So if this is a housing center, it's going to be pretty loud, and it's going to be pretty far from. It's going to be on the furthest corner possible to the rest of campus itself for classrooms and stuff like that. The big news there, for me at least, they're looking to upgrade the volleyball atmosphere, grow it from 4,000 to 6,000. That right now, 4,000 is kind of the maximum capacity inside of Greg Gym. They've been playing volleyball there for Lord knows how long. Obviously, it's a fantastic environment, but with the way that this volleyball program has been performing, it's probably best to get more eyes and a little bit of a bigger crowd on campus for these women. It's a fantastic opportunity. And look, if that's the case, look, they're totally redoing that entire area. I drove by the Texas indoor football facility. They're starting to really put up some of the panels, starting to get the framing. The skeleton of the indoor looks done. So that whole area, if you graduated from Texas about 10 years ago and you haven't been back since, it's a brand new place over there on East Campus.
Or 30 years ago.
Yeah. Hey, who knows?
just gonna put that out there. That's interesting, but you say that's far away, CJ. The drum used to be further. It was across the street even from there, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it's interesting that Chris Del Conte continuing to invest in facilities on top of NIL and other aspects. That shows the health of the athletic department, in my opinion. I am excited because guess what? We have Texas head volleyball coach Jarrett Elliott coming on tomorrow morning's Coffee and Football as well to join us.
Nice.
That'll be around 9:15, I believe, in the morning. Hopefully we could ask him about this, but he's there in the round of 16 right now with a game coming up later this week or
Indiana on Friday.
Indiana on Friday. So look, more progress at the University of Texas.
Yeah. Hey, Bobby, so two things. One, I had heard this as a CDC had mentioned this in a town hall a few years ago. I was under the impression that if they were going to do this, it was going to be where the bubble in the football practice fields are currently, but just moving it over a little bit to where it is now. At least that's where the proposal is. And Bobby, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if this is still the case, and I only knew this because I didn't know this until Mac Brown told me many years ago. The athletic department has to pay the university every time they use Gregory Gym for something because there was something done many years ago. I think when Coach Royal was still the AD, where they basically gave Gregory Gym back to the university. So the athletic department actually spends money to play at the Greg whenever they use it. I don't know if that was still the case or not.
That's definitely still the case. That's why they built a workout facility just south of the football stadium. That was kind of an interim rec center. I think right now it still has a bunch of basketball courts up there, CJ. But yeah, the bigger piece, not only is this huge, it's just another commitment for the University of Texas. A lot of people thought, hey, now with NIL going on, what is that going to do to the other improvements we want to see across the athletic facilities? Some people said, oh, it's going to cut building out and building down and creating better facilities. Not at Texas, not right now, with this request for proposal going out for a volleyball facility. CJ, I'm curious what you said about the football facility and its progress right now. You said the paneling is going up, and that's closer into Jester Dorm, if people are familiar with that, in Weller Creek, or can't remember the name of that. But what is going on there? What did you see with that?
Yeah, I drove by earlier in the week. I put up a couple photos over on ontexasfootball.com. So we have a great thread there. If you're not already subscribed, go take a look there. But look, I think the skeleton of the indoor facility itself, so all the wrought iron, whatever they use to build these things, that's up. Now they're starting to build some of the paneling and roofing that will go obviously on the sides and on top of the indoor facility. It looks to me like there's a full slab of concrete down that will then feed to the 100-yard outdoor football facility or football field as well. There's also going to be an additional weight training, kind of a side field, as we've come to know at Dennis, where the offensive line likes to go as well, Bobby. So that looks to be completed. Now it's about building the actual structure, finishing it up, making it look pretty. And then last time I checked the website, it said August 2026. We'll see again, Jeff, you mentioned the town hall for CDC when that comes up, if that is the same timeline that they have moving forward for its ultimate completion.
Boy, that would be big time before football season. Because I tell you what, being out at those fields, Dennis Fields out there can be extraordinarily brutal in mid-August. So, and the what do you call it? The indoor facility that Texas currently has is a swamp during those times too. It is not a great place. So that's going to be good, I think, and healthy.
It's gross. And I'll say this too, CBS, when is grass coming? That's been the holdup this entire time, because they've used the indoor facility, the bubble, they use it for off season and a lot of other things. That's why they have to keep the turf at DKR, because when they can't use the bubble, they want to work out on the turf, they have to do it inside DKR. So as soon as the indoor, I'm not saying, don't say Jeff Howe said the 2026 season is going to be the first with grass at DKR, but once the indoor facility, the new practice facility is finished, that's probably next on the to-do list for CDC and SARC, is to get grass at DKR. I know they want it to happen. I know Schloss wants grass over at Dishfuck, but there's a lot more nuance there that goes into that. We're wrapping it up here, but I want to get to this super chat. Daryl, thank you for the super chat. So, Bobby, you mentioned this a little bit ago. How come we didn't get any foreshadowing from Desmond Howard while he was doing dishes that there would be a less than mutual parting of the ways at UM?
Yes. This is my whole point, Daryl, and one of the reasons why, I said karma is a what. Desmond Howard, what's his? Can somebody tell me what his Twitter looks like right now? I just get, or his TikTok, and that video he made about the University of Texas when nothing had transpired. I don't know. I mean, look, that's why. When people with national voices, it's one thing if Desmond Howard was just a Michigan fan and saying crap about the University of Texas or Steve Sarkisian. It's another when he carries a national voice. We all understand that. And that's yet another reason why what they did and what he did was so wrong. I've yet to see a direct apology to that. Anyways, I digress. That's not what this is about. Sherrone Moore fired by the University of Michigan for cause. Biff Poggi is the interim. We do not believe, by the way, that Michigan will opt out of the Citrus Bowl. Yep. If you're just
thank you, Bobby. Want to thank our sponsor again, real quick. Vaughn, shout out to Vaughn Lane for sponsoring.
Let me tell people about Vaughn Lane, because I've bid on them a bunch. Jeff, you mind if I do that?
No, go for it.
I love Vaughn Lane. Vaughn Lane, those guys know exactly how you want to travel. If you're worried about Christmas travel and holiday travel in the state of Texas, make sure you check out Vaughn Lane because there's no TSA lines. You don't have to worry about traffic. They take care of it all for you at Vaughn Lane and vaughnlane.com. Go check out their prices and rates going all around the state of Texas, as well as in the Southeast, Atlanta, Knoxville, Nashville, and obviously in Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, Plano, San Antonio, Austin, the Woodlands, even our beloved Austin, Texas. Every Vaughn Lane trip includes complimentary snacks, beverages, and hot towel service with complimentary meals available on select routes. Whether you're traveling for Christmas or into the new year, Vaughn Lane turns your travel into downtime. Book today and use code OTF25 to save $20 on your first ride. Vaughn Lane, your private jet on wheels.
And this super chat will help us kind of re-rack the primary discussion coming out of this. We got the Citrus Bowl. Well, I thought deep like Cheez-It covered turkey leg was going to be our big story of the day. I was dead wrong about that. Go to the On Texas Football Twitter account to see what I'm talking about. Shout out to Blake Monroe for the graphic. But the greatest says, so Michigan fired Moore for an inappropriate relationship with a staff member. Does Texas go get some of their commitments from this class? I think it's key to reiterate, guys, Texas can't just go start poaching from the Michigan class. Those guys signed paperwork that they now have to get out of that will no longer bind them to Michigan to where now they're free to go make another decision. CJ, I know you mentioned that. I just think that part of it is worth re-racking. But obviously, at the top of the list for Texas is going to be Malachi Lee, who I'll reiterate again, even when he committed to Michigan back in the summer, Texas never stopped recruiting him and really didn't stop until the ink was dry on the paperwork he sent to Michigan last week.
Yeah, so it's going to be really interesting to see what all transpires for these guys. Again, not just the signees, but the roster in its entirety. You know, the portal opens up December 2nd. That they're able to jump in whenever they want now. So that's going to be something to monitor real quickly. And again, for someone who committed to a head coach who was an offensive line guy, for Malachi Lee, for Ty Haywood, for Bobby, you mentioned Blake Frazier. You know, for these guys, there's a lot to consider. Obviously, a lot of different backgrounds and avenues that got them to Michigan. But with Moore out, I think everything's on the table.
Bobby, any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
I will go back to how it directly impacts Texas today. Is what does this do to the Michigan team for the Citrus Bowl? Do we get a team that rolls over, or that kind of galvanizes and fights against the difficulty, and shows their best against adversity? I'm going to be watching tomorrow for what the odds makers say in Vegas. The line going into it as of early this week was 5.5 points. What's that line going to be tomorrow? Okay, that's part one. Part two is what kind of bowl opt-outs are Michigan going to have? When we first started this, CJ went through a list of people that could opt out for Michigan because they're going to be NFL draft eligible. Will that follow through, or are they going to have one more game? And then last but not least, it's the portal and recruiting. Texas and Michigan do recruit a lot of the same players. I think there were 5 guys in this recruiting class that Michigan signed that Texas also offered. But what's more, in my opinion, we all know they recruit a caliber of player that Texas would absolutely probably like in the portal. And we have no clue what that's going to look like, either of those, until probably later this month. But it's a big impact, and I think it could have other implications if Michigan goes out and hires another coach, right? One of which we've mentioned before, and Kalen DeBoer. That would obviously be a guy that would be a Midwest guy. If he goes, then what happens to the Alabama roster? By the way, the Alabama general manager is Courtney Morgan, who is a Michigan offensive lineman and graduate, I believe. So it's a little thing there. He was formerly working for Harbaugh at Michigan before he went with DeBoer.
Boy, with the way the playoff works, if Alabama loses to Michigan and they're out if their season's done,
not Michigan.
Or no, Oklahoma. I'm sorry. If Alabama loses to Oklahoma and their season's done on the 19th, the 20th, whenever that game is, yeah, that could be a really big deal to get this thing going. And I'll just reiterate from my standpoint, Bobby, just to follow up on what you said. For me, I don't think it changes anything for Texas as far as bowl prep goes. The on-campus bowl practices specifically, it's a really good time to focus on yourself, continue to evaluate your roster, figure out, because guys are going to need all the data they can to figure out if they're going to the portal, if they're staying, whatever. And for Sark and company, hey, maybe guys that you didn't get to see much of that they didn't play, maybe this is now you have some scrimmage type situations during these bowl practices. So I'm far less concerned about how this can help Texas prepare for Michigan, and just continue to do what you do, focus on yourself, and get your roster ready to rock and roll for 2026. All right, guys, if nobody else has anything else, we're going to wrap this up. Again, shout out to Von Lane for sponsoring this live edition of On Texas Football. CJ and I will be back in about 2 hours with the Wednesday night live stream. It's CJ, myself, and Amanda Atwell. Amanda hosts the Wednesday night live stream, so we'll be taking your questions. We'll be talking more Sherrone Moore, Malachi Lee, whatever you guys want tonight. We'll be doing it here in a couple of hours. Bobby will be back with Jared and Blake tomorrow morning on Coffee and Football. And Bobby, if anybody missed it, you want to announce it again who your guest is tomorrow on Coffee and Football?
Oh, yeah, we've got Jarrett Elliott, women's volleyball coach at the University of Texas, on with us tomorrow morning. We'll also have Will Matthews, former Longhorn football player, and now the sideline analyst reporter for Longhorn Network on the football team. So that should be a good Coffee and Football tomorrow morning as well.
And don't forget, if you're not a member over at ontexasfootball.com, it's all right. You can head over to the site right now and sign up using the promo code OTFOG. That'll get you 1 year of access at ontexasfootball.com for $39.95. The up-to-the-minute recruiting portal, all our information. If we don't get it out here on the channel, you can definitely get it over at ontexasfootball.com. And one last super chat from the greatest. Thank you for the super chat. It says, thank you guys and happy holidays. I think that is a great way to wrap this one up. Again, CJ and I will be back in a little bit for the Wednesday night live stream. For CJ, for Bobby, for Matthew behind the scenes producing, and also shout out to Blake Monroe for helping out with this one and the entire On Texas Football staff. I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. And until next time, hook 'em.